Hi, everyone. Don't hit your laptop when you're starting your introduction. That's my first thought. No, you're back with Taking the Lead, of course. I'm Ken Jacobs, your host, your podcaster. And as I think most of you know by now, this is my opportunity to interview folks in the PR industry, mostly senior executives, mostly leaders, mostly friends over the years, sometimes strangers, but today it's a friend, and I think a bit of a mutual admiration society, someone I've known quite a while, and that's always a delight. And it's Anne Green. She's the principal and managing director of business consulting at G&S Business Communications. Previously, she was a principal and managing director of the New York office, and she is becoming CEO in January 2024. Very exciting. Many of you know her as the president and CEO and president and COO, or SVP general manager of Katz. And among her many honors, she was named a PR Week 40 Under 40 and a PR News 2015 list of top women in PR. I am so excited to welcome to the podcast Anne Green.
Oh, it's so good to see you, Ken. And it's definitely a mutual admiration society. It's been fun to reflect on how long we've known each other in the industry.
Yeah, and hard, probably PRSA New York or judging silver anvils or who knows. At a certain point,
Certainly.
you just know people, right? So
Yes.
anyway, let's talk about leadership. You've worked for two respected leaders I've long admired, Ralph Katz, go Q's, go Newhouse. Oh, I didn't even realize I'm sort of wearing orange today. That's in your honor, Ralph. And the late Andy Cooper, who was so respected and admired. And if you had to capture it, what are the most important things you've learned about leadership from them?
Interesting you mentioned Andy, who we lost, a number of years ago now, but I'm actually seeing his son, Danny Cooper, shortly after this for a coffee. And Danny is a wonderful marketing communications professional in his own right now. So I met Andy and Ralph when I was about 19 years old, when I interned at Burson Marsteller, New York, back in 92. And I would say, it was wonderful to ruminate on what I learned from them. I picked four things, Ken. There's many more, but because they were tremendously generous in sharing leadership, and that is one quality I try to emulate. And I'm really a product of that. But I'd say, first of all, kindness. They're both kind individuals. I really believe in kindness. And I think our world right now, cruelty or nastiness seems to be perceived by some as a competitive edge or something to do. I don't subscribe to that at all. Courage. They're both brave people. And courage in terms of your humanity, but also in terms of running a business, because running a business, especially an agency, takes a lot of courage. You got to have a real backbone and you have to be brave. They gave me an ethical framework. They're both highly ethical individuals. And I subscribe to ethical decision making. It's a work I've done with the PR Council quite a bit, and it's something that I try to bring every day. And I think that ethics and how you bring that lens to your life is under discussed. And then the last thing I would say is commitment to excellence. Like Andy and Ralph were the kinds where if we had a big pitch and it was midnight and they felt this one thing wasn't good enough, we worked on it. And as a young professional, I was like, can I go home? And it wasn't a sweatshop environment. It's more that when it comes to client service and our commitment to each other, they're committed to excellence.
Yeah, I think that so many good points. PR agency ownership is not for the faint of heart. Leadership is not for the faint of heart. And I always say, fear is just an awful business strategy, right? So if you're feeling fear, work through it, hire a coach, reach out to the bravest person you know, or imagine what would they do in this moment? Because when we're in fear, it can be hard to imagine courage. But sometimes if you think of the person or the people in your world who are courageous, and what would they do? Yeah. Like the light bulbs go off. So yeah, four great points. And boy, agree with you so much on kindness. We need it. And I think you can be all those things. You can be courageous, you can be kind, you can have a strong backbone, you can work late. And yeah, kindness is not the antithesis of that. Kindness can drive followership. So, we've mentioned colleges, we mentioned Newhouse. Speaking of colleges, many of your peers, they study PR, mass communications, TV, radio. Many have an MBA. You have, I'm going to maybe not get it right, an MPhil, ABD, maybe that's a master's of philosophy from NYU with a focus on 19th century American literature. What did you learn about leadership from that?
So the ABD means I did most of my PhD, but I left at dissertation stage. So I joke with my academic friends, it's like I'm a ghost that roams the earth. I'm not fully formed, but they laugh at that. But I was a liberal arts person through and through. My undergrad was at Vassar College, and I did English and women's studies and vocal performance. And then I intended to be a professor, which is a story I tell often. And I intended to be an academic. And so that might explain some things for folks out there who know me. But I don't regret, I left Burson Marsteller to go get my PhD, but then I kept freelancing at Burson until they're like, please don't just stay here forever. And then I joined Cooper Katz to help Andy and Ralph out a bit. And then I stayed. And eventually at dissertation stage, I decided this is the career and made a pivot. But I never regret that because yes, is it functional? Would it be more functional to get an MBA? Perhaps, but my attitude is that our field is really fueled, especially in client service, by intellectual curiosity and a relentless love of learning. And that sounds like a cliche, but it truly typifies me. And when I interview people, if people say, what are you looking for in employees? I look for intellectual curiosity. The fact that you have to be psyched to learn new things, and what a privilege it is. I think the other things that grad school gave me was openness to different lenses on the world. Ways of living, ways of seeing, putting oneself in others' experience. Literature especially helped that. I think it gave me a critical apparatus. Literature and the work that I did, especially in the 90s in grad school, it was a very theory-heavy time. So you really had a lot of critical lenses through which to analyze things. And the other thing about being in grad school at that time is that you had to know a lot of crazy stuff like Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault and like all these different theories. And it was really intersectional, and you had to learn stuff super fast and be able to speak it back almost instantly as if you were an expert. And it was a real exercise in imposter syndrome. But I think for my field now, in our field, you have to learn a lot of information and speak in the language of the client so quickly. So whenever people do advanced learning, whether it's a comms or PR or MBA or liberal arts humanities, I think you take something away from that that's really helpful to leadership in this field.
Yeah, it's very rare, but you make a very compelling case. And I think one thing for me, I almost always bring it back to leadership or hear it or see it in the leadership lens, is that to be a truly effective leader, you've decided you're going to be a lifelong learner, and you're going to be a lifelong learner about leadership. Because although there are many truisms and foundations, we are learning new things about leadership, how to lead people, how to coach people. We are learning. I'm finding what I find very exciting is how our brains change, and how, you don't have to be a neuroscientist to use neuroscience. You got to use it ethically, of course, but the ability to understand what's going on in the brain of the person you're leading or coaching, and that they have the capacity to create new neural pathways. And for example, the power of the open-ended empowering question, to me, it's just fascinating and fills me with hope about even with the possible inroads of AI on coaching. I think there are new things that at this point take the human brain. Anyway, in light of the fact that you've been named CEO starting in January, I guess we can say the acquisition of Cooper Katz by G&S has gone well. That said, what do you know now that you wish you had known at the time of the acquisition?
I do think it was a success. Any acquisition always has its ups and downs. I mean, what I wish I would have known, Ken, is that a giant pandemic was coming that would have been really helpful for making real estate decisions, to understand what was coming from a talent perspective. Just, I joke that, and it's kind of it's a joke, but it's real. I feel like COVID kind of everyone took their deck of cards and threw them into the air and they said, what now? So obviously COVID in some ways, and the talent movement and many of my wonderful colleagues finding new callings elsewhere. And I always say leave with love. I really embrace people's paths. I think COVID was disruptive in some case to the arc of the integration. But overall, I do think it was a success. Here's the one thing, only very recently, that I really came to think about more. When we first came together, we had such powerhouse teams on both sides, especially in New York, because that was really where we brought together. And we had long-term clients on both sides and a lot of stability on those client teams. And as part of that acquisition, I really didn't want to mix up that card deck. If you use the card analogy again, I didn't want to switch the teams around because we wanted to show that stability for the folks and for the clients. But I think that was a mistake. I think it would have been really great if right off the bat, we had done some very intentional, thoughtful mixing of the account teams that would have brought different leaders in close proximity to each other faster and allowed that working and friendships and stuff to create faster. I think that it went really well, but I think that would have been even more transformational more quickly. So, I appreciate that question because I have been reflecting on that now.
Yeah. And we can always learn from looking back. So let me ask you a follow-up. So with that understanding, what are you doing to either merge teams or merge thinking, or, tell us a bit about that.
Well, and it's interesting because I think working in a hybrid environment has made everybody much more thoughtful and intentional about this overall. Hybrid to me is continuing to evolve. We keep turning pages. We're not in stasis post-COVID. We have had folks in office about 2 days a week, sometimes 3 days a week now for quite a long time. We sort of found our moment and went for it, and it's been pretty successful overall. We do have some fully remote employees too, but we have Chicago, Raleigh, and New York. And I think, though, that even now, as we keep feeling out, how are we feeling? How are we feeling at different stages of life? Our younger staff versus those that maybe have children or live in, it's different life stages.
Sure.
But also, we are now more cross office than we've ever been before. So teams are really working. And I think even just a few weeks or months ago, we had a learning and brainstorming session about excellence in managing in a hybrid environment, because people of all levels are trying to explore that. So I think the lessons I tried to take of how do we bring people together, create understanding, create inclusive leadership, work, hybrid remote with each other. When do we get together? When do we relate over online? That's all things that is informed by this moment, but also by what I've learned in the past.
Great. So seems like a good segue into when I ask you a bit about your vision for the agency, and in particular, your vision for managing two of the biggest challenges, I think, facing agency leaders today: salary, equity, and reaching DEI goals.
Yep. So I'll take it in two parts. The vision, as I've articulated it with our team, for me, it's an intentional and organic evolution. Our shareholder group and our CEO, Luke Lambert, who I'm very close with, I knew him long before we came together, just as Ralph had and Andy had as well. This is an intentional or an organic evolution. And what I've said to folks, the vision is really to provide the greatest range of opportunities for our people and our clients and the agency as a whole, which is a big thing. You've got to, what does that even mean? I think for me, it's really about unleashing our full potential. And those areas we're a very highly integrated firm. And I think leaning more into that integration and what it means to work across those disciplines, because that's hard. I've had separate creative teams and other teams for years and years, even at a smaller firm. And it's so powerful, but there's a lot we have to do to optimize that. It is leaning into diversity and also that inclusive leadership. And I think it's also communicating what makes G&S special in the world. We do a lot of great work, but who knows us? Why do they know us? How do we sparkle more out there? And frankly, to me, the vision is also nailing the basics. It is hard to run with excellence internally day in and day out and do all the things we know we should do to run the business really well for ourselves and our clients. So that's the vision piece, right? And there'll be more to come. But I think in terms of the pay equity and DE&I, on the pay equity side, we're already very deep on that. We did a deep pay equity analysis with our accounting firm Anshin, with also legal counsel from Davis and Gilbert back in 2021. We adopted a lot of best practices, compensation committee, the rhythm of when we're looking at merits, how we communicate them, structure them. We're really trying to dig deep there and create processes that are going to help us maintain an equitable compensation environment, which is what Anshin had found. But they found, look, you need to add best practices or else there can be problems there. But in terms of the DE&I overall, one thing that's been hard during COVID, it was so dynamic talent-wise. So we made huge progress in some ways, but then you step back in others. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And we're diversifying on the upper levels from a gender perspective. I'm the first female CEO that G&S will have, but we're still largely white in our senior leadership. So that's a journey that's real. And I think that for us, first and foremost, really leaning into what does it actually mean to lead in an inclusive way. And that's really about retention and creating a sense of belonging. There's the surface level of DE&I, and then there's levels down. And as you get deeper, you find the real human moments of challenge and conflict where we have to see each other and look at our own bias and really understand what is happening in this moment that I don't even understand. And then we have to double down on where, even in a down economic environment that we can recruit, how do we continue that intentionality, continue to have the connections at all levels that bring the widest possible candidate range, and then continue to look at what is their experience when they're here. So I know that's a lot, Ken, but there's so much to it. And I'm very grateful to be partnered, our VP of DE&I, Marjani Williams. She is very intentionally, she has a client service portion of her role as well as DE&I, because I felt it's so important that Marjani be rooted in the business, know the business, be connected to the business. So that gives her even more connection and credibility in the work that she's doing then to in partnership with our leaders, our other leaders, to advance DE&I at the firm.
Great. So you're doing the work, it sounds like.
Trying, no place is perfect.
Looking within.
Yes.
And acknowledging, as you mentioned. All right, last question, real fast. It's a question I asked you in the Taking the Lead column in PRSA Strategy and Tactics, Lord knows how many years ago, but you came to leadership rather early in your career. Many of us did. What were the benefits and the downsides of that experience?
Good question. Upside is I started to really be an organizational leader, as in I'm in the room for the hardest decisions of running a business, and I'm fully exposed to all of the numbers and the questions and how the sausage is made, or whatever metaphor, for over 20 years now, almost 22, 23 years. So I've seen a lot, and I have a deep and broad well of experience to draw on. And I also, in terms of the courage piece, when I feel like, whoa, my God, what's happening here? I can remind myself, think of all the things we've managed through before. We have an incredible partnership here. We have an incredible bench of leaders. We've been able to get through things in the past. Believe that you will find your way through. So that's the upside. And just a lot to draw on. Now, COVID was a left turn for all of us, but a lot to draw on. The downside is that, as you said before, leadership brings its own heavy load. It's a burden I really welcome. A lot of people said, oh my God, you're CEO soon. Are you stoked? I'm like, you've never been a CEO if you say it that way. Like it's an incredible honor. But one of the things about this kind of leadership and running a business and being an owner, because I've also been an owner twice, not just a leader, but an owner, it can run you over. And when I was younger, 10 or 20 years ago, I didn't really understand that the only person that can help it not run me over is myself. That I have to set the boundaries. I have to be healthy. My colleague, Brian Hall, who's going to become president, is so amazing about this. He's such a partner to me in this way of thinking. How do we, and all of our other partners, how do we take care of ourselves so we can take care of others and be there for others? So, between my colleagues and being a bit older, and my husband and my friends, and also being in therapy and really being intentional about that, it helps me to approach the job and say, what is it I do to set the kind of boundaries that allows me to be the best leader I can be? So those are the upsides and downsides as I see it.
That's great. And I really appreciate your candor. I think to be a leader, you need a team of self-care, and that might include therapy or coaching or yoga or meditation or, well,
all the things, Ken, all those things.
It can include all of that.
Yeah.
But, you can't lead others, I believe, and I've said this on the podcast before, you can't lead others unless your cup is full. And we always say, this is why you put, when traveling by air, you put your oxygen mask on before dealing with your traveling companions. You must take care of yourself to lead, take care of, and support others. So that's a great place to end. Thank you so much for sharing so much leadership wisdom with our viewers. And I was expecting nothing less. So it was a joy to see you again, even virtually. We do need to get together in New York. So we'll figure that out for this fall. I do need to get back on the train, as it were. And I just want to thank you again. And I wish you so much success in January, which I think, it's just a continuation of your journey. But if anyone's going to succeed, it's going to be you.
Oh, so Ken, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. And thanks for the chance to reflect on these questions. They were good ones.
Oh, good. I'm glad. All right, everyone. Thank you all for being here. And as we always say, until next time, keep on taking the lead.